Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable and the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. RICO 12 is also a resource for the loved ones of addicts. I'm Justin B., a child of an all-powerful and perfectly loving God and a multidisciplinary addict, and I'm living in the miraculous state of recovery, and I'm blessed to be the moderator of this roundtable and the steward of the RICO 12 family of recovery resources. I'm joined here by David G. and Nikki M., and we're excited here to jump into the big book and keep this journey going as we read from Bill's story, the first page of Bill's story on page 1 of the big book. But before we get into that, let's go to David. David, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and just telling us a little bit about yourself today.
Absolutely. David G. I'm a alcoholic addict of many sorts. Grateful for a recovery date in AA of August 8th, 1994, and in the SA Fellowship of October 1st of 2019. A little bit about myself. I'm very passionate about 12-step work, taking people through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and helping them to recover from a hopeless state of mind. And really, I just have a passion for people. I love to do all sorts of different things, but the one thing that I do the most of is 12-step work and share this book with many, many, many people. I have a lot of big book studies that are on YouTube. They're on Spotify, Google Drive. Look it up. We really, really, really get in depth with the big book. So thank you, Justin, for allowing me to be a part of this with you and Nikki.
Love it, David. And thanks for mentioning those things. We'll have links to anything that David's working on in the show notes of this podcast. Nikki, why don't you take a second, introduce yourself, and offline before we started recording here, you talked a little bit about something that's motivating you here today. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Nikki M, and I'm an intelligent agent spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation, and I'm just so grateful to be here. And Justin and I were just, water cooler talk at the office around the round table, and he was asking about my weekend, and we buried a beautiful boy. And I want to actually dedicate this episode to Andrew E. He was born April 6, 1992, the same year as my daughter, Justin. And he passed away this past October 22nd, 2023 from fentanyl. I live in Toronto. Justin lives in Washington. And I'll tell you something, we're both talking about the crisis of the drug addiction, alcoholism, whatever you want to call it. But fentanyl is robbing our youth. So I'm a sponsor, and I'll take anyone, any addiction or affliction through the steps. And, the first thing I asked the mom when I saw her at the service this weekend, I was asked to speak, Justin, I said, there's a program called Al-Anon. And she said, Nikki, I'm already in it. I'm just grateful to be here. Love you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And our thoughts and prayers go out to Andrew's mom and family and loved ones. It's a very sad thing that, like you said, fentanyl seems to be robbing our world of a large portion of this next generation that's coming up. It's a scary thing. We're going to get into the solution here. I'm grateful to be I'm grateful for the things we've already covered in the big book. It's been really amazing ride so far. We've read up through the end of the doctor's opinion, and we're going to be jumping into page 1. So all the stuff we've done up to this point are in the Roman numerals, which is something that a lot of people skip over. But as we've learned through these episodes, man, do not skip over those Roman numerals. They are deep and powerful. But let's get to page 1, chapter 1, Bill's story. And I'm going to read this first page. And this is what we're going to be swimming through and discussing for the next few minutes here. All right, here we go. Chapter 1, Bill's story. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. Ominous warning, which I failed to heed. 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation? My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. All right, there's page 1, and there's so much in here, and I hope, I'm going to ask David to give us a little history lesson on this as he goes through and shares his experience, strength, and hope on page 1. Tell us a little of the history, and then give us some of the things that stuck out to you. David, why don't you start us off there?
All right. Thank you, Justin. Bill's story, there was always controversy whenever I first sobered up. Why is Dr. Bob's, story not in the front? Bill's is, Bob's not. Bill was an egomaniac. Bob was humble, and on and on and on. But if you read Dr. Bob's story in the back of the book, he suffered with the obsession 4 years after he got sober. Bill, being an egomaniac, worked the steps and recovered. What story would you rather hear first? I don't know about you, but I know about me. I want to hear the one of the man who recovered. And that's what we'll see in this story. Now, we have to remember this is the 1920s, and, Bill is away at war, and he has his first spiritual experience on this page. And I didn't know this for a long time reading the Big Book. When you come down to the part where he says, we landed in England, I visited Winchester Cathedral, much moved. Now, I always thought that, traffic was going by or trains. It was pretty, but he's talking about something going on the inside of him. And people say, how do you know that, David? Well, read the next sentence. I wandered outside. And we're not talking about outside. We're talking about what was going on inside prior to him wandering outside. His attention was caught by an old doggerel on an old tombstone. This was a man named Thomas Thatcher. And so Thomas had died. And when you read this, you would automatically think that Thomas was an alcoholic, and so did Bill. Good thing he realized different later on. But if you read the history, it says, here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. Now, the water was toxic over there. So in order to drink that, they would have died. They just would have died. So they drank what was called cold small beer. And it had very low alcohol content in it. But what happened was he got a bash that was made of this toxic water, and it killed him. So Thomas Thatcher didn't die an alcoholic. He died from drinking cold small beer. And by musket or by pot, they sold, that's not the 420 that I know of back here in the States, of course. This is a pot of beer. And so this is how he caught his death. He got sick. I've got something here that comes from some of Bill's writings, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I'd like to read this because this was the original that came from Bill's Winchester Cathedral experience. It says, there we were in dear old England, soon to cross the channel to the great unknown. I stood in Winchester Cathedral the day before crossing hand in hand with head bowed, for something had touched me that I'd never felt before. Now this falls in with what we read here about he much moved, and he wandered outside. He said, I've been wondering in a rare moment of sober reflection what sense there could be to killing a carnage of which I was soon to become an enthusiastic part. Where could the deity be? Could there be such a thing? Where now was God, the God of the preachers, the thought of which used to make me so uncomfortable when they talked about him? Here I stood on the abyss edge, in the abyss into which thousands were fallen that very day. A feeling of despair settled down on me. Where was he? Why did he not come? And suddenly, in that moment of darkness, he was there. I felt an awe-enveloping, comforting, powerful presence. Tears stood in my eyes as I looked about, and I saw the faces of others nearby, that they too had glimpsed the great reality. Much moved, I walked outside of the cathedral yard, where I read the following inscription on a tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is never forgot whether he dieth by musket or by pot. The squadron of bombers swept overhead in the bright sunlight, and I cried to myself, here to adventure, and the feeling of being the great presence disappeared, never to return for many years. So as we move through the rest of Bill's story, in several episodes to come, we'll see where he reflects back on this. When he talks about, for a brief moment, I'd needed one of God and he came. So this was just a little added into some of the history. I encourage anyone and everyone to read the history of this book because it goes much deeper than what we read on the pages. And this was just the beginning of Bill's spiritual experience. All spiritual experience in my experience have the same common denominator, that's suffering. So if you're suffering, get ready. You're probably going to have a great experience here. Stay with us. Thank you all.
Thank you, David. And I love that. Is Bill's writings, is that contained in a book, or is that something you just have to kind of go in and find, from his original writings? Where do you get that?
He did write Pass It On. That was his original story. So, and that's a good book. They also have Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. A lot of it is found there. Language of the Heart, AA Comes of Age. I mean, there are so many history books of AA in the early beginnings, and this is a powerful thing to dive into because it really opens up the big book in another way of just looking at it. Hey, this is my experience. That's great. I have to share that with others, but I also want to try to give the history as I go along with my guys. And it's, I don't recover on knowledge, and I don't have to have knowledge in order to recover. But if I'm going to talk about the history of the big book, then I need to know what I'm talking about. So I try to keep a good track of it, of all that stuff. But Pass It On by Bill Wilson.
Love it. Thank you so much, David. And I'll put some links to those in the show notes of this episode. I'll track down some of those books and do that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Nikki, tell us a little bit about your experience, strength, and hope of what you gained from page 1 of Bill's story.
Well, thank you. And, I'm just so grateful to have this God Squad because David's on mine and so is Justin. And everybody, you can have access right here to them with me. And don't feel bad if anyone's listening going, I wish I knew what David's been here. I don't want to say 3 decades, but quite there. I think David just had his birthday. So yeah, a long time, everybody. So this is not an overnight matter. So I'm sitting here going, I need to know all that. No, you don't, Nikki. You've been here a while. Buckle in. This is a lifestyle. So that being said, I have a lot of notes where it talks about Bill and Bill's story. This is his journey, the progression of alcoholism, and where it says he's flattered, making him feel. My line out shows that's his validation addiction. See, I'm always looking for similarities between me and Bill, my sponsees and me and Bill. How do we relate to this? Well, validation addiction's already starting right there. Makes me feel, I'm part of something at last. My line out, I was very lonely and turned to, DOC or drug of non-choice. Alcohol and drugs, that didn't do it once I hit men and money. I was very lonely. So I turned for decades, I'm 50, everybody, to men and money. And I forget the strong warnings and the prejudice that I have towards all of these things. I'm a woman I would never do that, Justin. I'm that girl who's going to sit and go, I'm not that kind of woman. And then God puts a 6-inch stiletto on me and I become that kind of woman. You understand? So I have this programming that I forget who I am. I'm the intelligent agent spearhead of God's ever advancing creation. And I've had warnings all through my life. And I don't heed any of them. I just don't listen because I'm so selfish and self-centered. At the beginning, you asked us the question and I was like, oh, I'm twinning with David because David said his passion is for people. For a long time, Justin, I was like, I have no talent. I'm not a singer. I'm not good at anything. Well, my passion is for people. And if you're listening out there, friends, if you have a passion for people, this is the space for you because I use my talent for leadership. I'm a trusted servant, here. I my line out where it says my talent for leadership. We all have gifts. What did Bill use his for? What do you use your for? What do I use my talents and gifts for? Because I do have a talent. It's just blotted out by other things. And it says, I imagined where he's talking about his imagination. Again, that's the fantasy addiction kicking off there. That's the, I imagined, would place me at the head of that. My imagination had me placed at the head of the world because I'm God, don't you know, Justin? So I'm Bill. And then I'm listening here and I'm David G because people are my passion. And Justin, you and I are each other too. So I just keep looking for the similarities every time I read this. I'm looking for the similarities, not the differences, because a lot of my friends who are in Coda, Al-Anon, all the process addictions, alcohol's, don't look for alcohol here, you guys. Don't look for it. I was very lonely, and what do you turn to? A lot of my friends turn to isolation and just start self-obsessing. I'm depressed, Nikki. No, you're self-obsessed. And you're not turning to alcohol or drugs or to men or even money or food or whatever you're acting on. You're turning just to yourself and thinking about me. So I'm just so grateful to be here because I'm seeing if I don't do this work, I'm not going to make it, Justin.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you so much. I've got a couple of questions for each of you. And David, I want to go back to this history thing with you a little bit. I love how you wrapped up the last bit of your share after I asked you where you got these writings from Bill. You mentioned that, hey, something to the effect of recovery happens in the book. It's not in the history. I can have all this knowledge and it helps me, but it's not going to make me recover. I see myself out here in the listening audience. If I'm out here just, checking this out and trying to figure out, okay, what's up? I might be tempted to say, man, I will never be able to recover until I understand everything and as thoroughly as what David just shared. Talk to us a little bit about how that's a big fat lie I'm telling myself, if that's what I'm saying, and what is this, what is the solution, even if I don't have to know all this about the history?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime a thought like that comes to me that I'm not going to be able to recover unless I do this or I do that, that ought to be my first clue that it's all BS. There's not anything I can do other than be a willing participant to go through this work with a loving God and a big book sponsor. And so, I have to really be careful to watch those thoughts. Now, when I came in here right at 3 decades ago, as Nikki said, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know any of this for a long, long time. None of it mattered. I wanted to look at the similarities that Nikki pointed out here with Bill on this first page. I was a part of life at last. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. I fancied myself a leader, my talent for leadership. These are the things that I want to look back and reflect and say, okay, how did that work out for me? And, I would say if you're new, don't worry about any of the big history of the book. Just move through the story, look at the similarities, look at how the hand of God will move in this man's life, the same way that it'll move in yours and it's moved in mine and these folks here, Justin and Nikki, and just do the work. I mean, knowledge is a wonderful thing, but as I said before, I can't recover on that. I mean, Bill's story is a great story. But it's just set me up for what's the best yet to come. And, it's going to show me there is a solution. He's going to write a little more about alcoholism. He's going to give me 3 exercises and we agnostics to do. And then we're going to look at the third step and we're just going to move right through the experience the same way that he outlines it on page 13 of this book in his story. So these are the things that I would tell anybody to be interested in. I only throw this out here because it seems to be that a lot of people are seeking that. And, if you've been in the big book for a long, long time and you're looking for something a little deeper to make it come alive more, this is very good information to have. But that's there again. It's just information. We don't need that to recover. All we need is what's in this book. Just do what's here. The rest of that will come.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that because if I was dependent on the history of it, and I love the history of it, but if I was dependent on that, I wouldn't recover. So I'm grateful for that. Thanks for sharing that. Nikki, You know, you mentioned this phrase and David reiterated it. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. You know, loneliness is something that rejection, you know, that these are words that to me just make me want to run to my addiction. Talk to us about loneliness and how to treat loneliness in a healthy way, according to your experience, strength, and hope.
Well, that's a great question. And I think that's why we're all here, whether we're trying to find, comfort in a bottle or in a person or in the fridge. And, why are you lonely? Number one, because you're driven. You're not driven by love. You're driven by your selfish, self-seeking ways. 400 forms of madness is what makes me function every day. So I need to get relief from that. So I always like to go to, you're lonely. You don't understand, Nikki. I'm going to die. Okay, well, there's a substitute. And it's vastly more than that. It's called a fellowship, page 152. See, a lot of people come in here, I don't have a talent. Well, do you know why you exist, human? See, this book will tell us. It tells you what your purpose is. Your purpose is you're to serve. Then it will tell you what your job is. The book on page 102 will tell you that your job is to be of maximum helpfulness. So if your purpose for walking this planet is to serve, caveat, wanting nothing in return, how can you be lonely? See, a servant can't be lonely. You got to get out there and serve. And then it's your job. Your job is to be helpful. So you got to get out there and be helpful. See, God didn't create you to isolate. So we just, I may have to drift people out if you're brand new, like David said, David's growing in effectiveness and understanding, as we all are. With the longer we're here, we need to reach for many helpful books. But right now, if you're new, just get into what does the book say. And you're lonely. Well, if you're anything like me and my friends, you're probably a tornado and you've blown all your friends and family away. So we need to get in here and do exactly what this book says. It says that you need to serve, and you need to do that one day at a time. Don't get overwhelmed, everybody. So, I always arm people with the facts. You're lonely because of this. Look at how you treat people. And especially in the sponsor-sponsee relationship. I had a sponsee real quick, some experience, strength, and hope. She spelt my name wrong. My name's spelled Nikki. And she's been working with me. She's been on my meeting. She sought me out to sponsor her. And she kept spelling my name wrong. And I said, do you see, you don't even take interest in how to spell my name. So if you're showing up like that for me, how are you showing up for the people that you really know and love? How are you showing up? Details matter, everybody. So it's the little things. That's why you're lonely. You don't even know how to spell your friend's name. Wake up your sponsees. Show them what they can't see, the little mental blank spots and blind spots. Because, again, I'm making decisions based on self that place me in a position to be lonely. So get out there and serve.
Wow. Thank you, Nikki. The little pep talk there. I enjoy that. Thank you. All right, let's jump over into takeaways here. We've had so much good stuff here in this episode as we read through the first page of Bill's story. David, what's a takeaway from today's conversation that you'll be taking to somebody you're working with and serving in this work?
Well, as always, it's good to be here with the both of you, and I'm very grateful. Other than the spiritual experience on this page, I see self all over it in Bill's life, same as I did mine. A story is just a story. There's only one story I'm interested in, and that's the story of how many thousands men and women have recovered. So all this stuff is great about Bill, but when we get to the back of the book, that's the part of the story I'm interested in the most. How he recovered. And because how he recovered is how I'm going to recover. Now, some people say, oh, he did that in an afternoon. He done this and that. No, he didn't. I don't have to do it in an afternoon. I wish I could. Everybody be sober. We'd get together this afternoon, but that's just not the way it is. So what I'm going to take away is that this is Bill's story. I can relate to this story. I can do what he did. But the story I'm interested in is how I recovered, how you recovered, how they recovered, and how the people that I'm working with is going to recover. That's the story I'm most interested in there. So good stuff here today. Thank you both. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Nikki, how about you? What's a takeaway for you?
That I'm not alone. That I am not alone, that my friend Bill is also a validation addict. He may have not have called it that, but that's what I'll call it. A fantasy addict. I imagined I could or would. That's a fantasy addiction, not being present now. I am not alone. That's what I'm seeing here. That again, I'm not, you don't understand. Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. And it seems so do you guys. My friends Justin B and David G understand, and so does this guy Bill W. So if you're out there and you're alone, and my takeaway today is that this is work, everybody. Please, if you're here, work a 12-step program, because business is booming. There's many Andrew E's and moms and dads of Andrew E's out there that need this solution. You're not alone. We all have talents. And let's use them in the rooms together. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate that. My takeaway has to do with the phrase, my talent for leadership, I imagined would place me at the head of vast enterprises. Anyways, it's my talent for leadership. One thing that I've learned as I've gone through the steps with myself, with the sponsor and with sponsees, is that the character defects that I really identify in steps 4 and 5, and I start using the processes of steps 6 and 7 to eliminate or to identify and move through, have really helped me understand that many of those character defects stem from a talent, a positive talent that I have just tweaked and made a counterfeit of that talent, of that blessing. And I'm going to take away that I need to identify and help others identify the root blessing that maybe has been bastardized into a character defect, and see where we can turn back using godly principles to make those right. Anyways, good stuff today. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Nikki. Really appreciate it. You out there in the listening audience, if you have any questions, you can send an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. If you'd like to connect with any of us, you can do that through there. Also, you can follow up and see any projects that each of us are working on. I've got all those links in the show notes of this podcast, as well as the links I'll have to those books that David referenced earlier in the podcast. And to learn more about what we're doing, go to rico12.com. Support us if you feel your higher power guiding you to do so. It really does help us spread this message and get this message out to more and more people. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Nikki. Everybody join us as we live in this fellowship of the Spirit and come trudge this adventurous and amazing and just enlightening road of happy destiny with us. Work it. You are worth it.